Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. Haltifors. They make a damn good axe. Kind of on par with Grand Furs Brook. Let me know if you guys think this is something I should carry at the CanadianPreparedness.com store. It's something I'm considering anyways. But that's not what this video is about. But it's fun holding an axe, talking about topics like this. So I want to talk a bit today about the proverbial socio-economic reset that lots of preppers and survivalist thinkers, apocalyptic like to talk about. And it's the idea that in the case of a prolonged grid down scenario, which would likely be at least countrywide, that the financial records which exist out there in the virtual ether on the internet, in the digital world of things, that the records would just vanish, and deeds, ownership, if you didn't have a way to prove with physical paper or something that you own something, you would not technically be granted that thing. That whole idea that possession is 9/10 of the law. But what happens when the status you've accrued is no longer recognized, and the things that you possess you are no longer able to claim ownership of and have the rule of law protect your rights to those properties? Really, all you're going to have at that point is your skill set. But I've heard it said there's one socio-economic theory that if you were to distribute all the money equally to people, that within a matter of a generation or so, maybe things would be back right to the way they are now, because some people would spend their money, others would invest that money, others would use that money to, towards the creation of something which would go on to be great, like something like Microsoft or Google or Facebook or something like that, and they would go on to be billionaires. So one theory of the big reset is that things would essentially just work themselves out to the way they are now. Now you have a lot of people nowadays who, I think part of the allure to apocalyptic thinking is the idea that, I don't like going to work, I don't like my job, I'm just not getting any satisfaction in this world of mundane things which we've created for ourselves. So I would prefer if the world just ended. Misery loves company type thing. And that maybe I would be on the same level as everybody else, and I would be able to, redeem myself and hopefully come out the top dog. I used to think that because the system is corrupt, and because of the nepotism, the cronyism, the oligarchy, the monopolies that you have, that it's not really a fair socioeconomic system right now, in the sense that I could wake up tomorrow and another person could wake up tomorrow who's from another family who is perhaps a bit more financially privileged than I was, and they would have more resources to put into action whatever sort of goals and dreams and hopes they had. Now, I'm not saying that I can't do those things. I, for one, am a firm believer that, you can do anything you put your mind to with hard work and dedication. However, the reality is, if that person had the same amount of drive that I did and more resources, they would come out more successful. So I used to think that in the reset, that the people who are on the top, that the pyramid would be sort of flipped upside down, because the people on the top get very soft. They're strutting around in their Louboutins, they're going out eating $500 meals, everything is taken care of, they have room service, they have maids, butlers, whatever, so they don't really have to fend for themselves at all. And because of that, they're not tough, they're not hardened to tough times like a lot of people in the lower classes are. So I used to think that, well, maybe that means that in a reset, things would flip upside down, and that maybe the last will be first and the first would be last. I still think that to a degree. I think that will be the case with many people who've been propped up by the system, not due to merit, but I mean, we have to accept also that the current paradigm that we're living in is not the best one. So you could be like, ideally it's not the best paradigm in the sense that there's a lot of other systems which would work better, you know, but we just haven't realized those systems yet as a species. But democracy, as I said, it sucks, but it's the best thing we got, right? So that was a quote. I can't remember who said that. It's a terrible economic system or political system, but it's the best we have. So we got to deal with it. But I now think that while it's true that there are many weak people at the top, I think that their sense of entitlement, and I'm not talking about the sense of entitlement that says, you know, I deserve this and I deserve that, but there's a certain confidence which comes with that sense of entitlement that can make, like, let's say there was a big reset, the government comes out the next day, says, all right, everybody gets $10,000, and you were a multi-millionaire before the collapse. You know, your thinking would be along the lines of, I'm a millionaire, I gotta be a millionaire, right? Whereas somebody else with that $10,000 would probably be quite content, and they wouldn't be hungry for anything else. And of course, this is in the rare case that this would ever happen. Obviously, it's very unlikely, number one, that a collapse of that sort would happen in the first place, and number two, that the government would come out and say, all right, everybody's equal now. It's not going to happen. We all know it's not going to happen. But I'm just saying, hypothetically, if that was to happen, the millionaire will have a certain mindset that they deserve, or that because they've already lived that life, that they can live it again, and that it's achievable, and thus they'll approach it with more confidence. And I think that that is going to go a long way in terms of determining who comes out the top dog post-collapse. It's not just going to be how many, you know, preps you have stored away, and even the skills necessarily. There's a lot of preppers and survivalists, bushcrafters, very humble people, like to keep to themselves. They're not schemers. They're not scammers. They probably don't have the greatest people skills, to be honest, and they might not be able to sniff out an ambush in the way that other people who are just sharks, wolves, you know, the Wolf of Wall Street type mentality, those people can do that. They like to take advantage of people, and so that is the element which may prevail, which is why I don't think it's a good idea for you to isolate yourself. And I made a video on this recently, that especially with technology, you want to be up to date as much as possible on the going trends of things, you know, pop culture, not so that you can revel in it and be a part of it and have to be dumbed down by it, but so you can know what's going on, so you can be aware of the world that you're living in. It's a part of situational awareness to have some exposure to that, so you know what you're up against. Otherwise, you're behind, and it might not serve you too well to know what the common meme is of the day, but there's something to be said about, you know, how you can strategize socially, knowing those trivial things, those trivial cultural things. So I think in a lot of cases, the people who are in positions of power now they're going to have a very hard time accepting equality, post-apocalyptic equality. So some of them are naturally going to become the marauder types who need to be in charge, who need to be in power. You know, otherwise they just don't feel that there's too much anxiety without the power that they had. So I would advise also, you know, depending on who you are, what your motives are, You know, don't just think that just because a collapse may happen that somehow automatically you're gonna come to the surface and come out the top dog, because you may well be sadly mistaken about that. There's a lot of very cunning people at the top of the pyramid who, preppers, survivalists or not, are going to be forces to be reckoned with. And you can't just write them off because they don't have survival skills, you know, because they don't know how to catch a fish or survive in conditions like this without a cabin and a snowmobile. Don't write people off. But in the big reset, you know, one of the biggest shocks to a lot of people is going to be the financial system, because that might be something, even if the grid were to come back on, that might be something that just doesn't come back. And I don't know if there's a manual entry for things that happen anymore, like with banks. You know, I don't know if there's a offline record that is kept, which is immune from the grid, you know, stored somewhere in servers. But without that, yeah, your whole identity as it exists now cannot be verified at that point. Even your education, potentially. If your education was rooted in digital records somewhere, you know, then that's something which would be questionable as well. So you could have a lot of people being imposters post-collapse, you know, because claiming that they had degrees or PhDs or whatever, expertise in certain areas, when they don't. There's a lot of good hustlers out there, a lot of good swindlers. So keep that in mind. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Thanks for watching. Canadian Prepper out.